Just let me know what it costs. And I'll
Yes. It's a hot mic.
Okay.
apply it.
That's a hot mic.
That's what Thank you.
To keep my 4-letter word to myself.
Yeah. Are we ready? Max? Are we ready?
Give me 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay. We are ready to go.
Okay. The Dallas People's hearing of the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus will come to order. Welcome to the People's hearing. Yay! Thank you, Carol. Thank you, everyone. My name is State Representative Ana-María Rodríguez Ramos, and I proudly represent Texas House District 102. It is my honor to serve as chair of today's hearing and as chair of the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus. On behalf of the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus, welcome and thank you for joining us. Bienvenidos, gracias por acompañarnos este día. Esta audiencia también es para ustedes porque su voz, sus experiencias y sus historias son fundamentales para el trabajo que hacemos como legisladores. Today's hearing is part of a statewide effort of the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus to hear directly from Texans about the issues affecting their families, jobs, businesses, and communities. Today, you all are helping us form our core policies and priorities for the next legislative session. Dallas was built on the backs of the people who are being priced out and deported out of our city. Immigrants make up 63.2% of Dallas construction workers and almost 39% of our business owners. Our city runs on their labor. Meanwhile, life keeps getting more expensive. In Dallas, you now need over $71,000 a year just to afford rent. Housing, food, and transportation climb every year while wages have stalled since 2009. This is not happening in a vacuum. In 2025 alone, America's billionaires added $1.5 trillion to their fortunes. The top 1% now hold a 31.7% of all the wealth in this country. The top 1% own a third of the wealth in this country, and they make donations to dictate Texas's laws. This is called an oligarchy. These people's hearings exist to listen to the worker, the renter, and every family barely holding on, because the establishment in Austin has stopped listening to you. They only hear the lobbyists and the moneyed interests. Today, we are here to listen to the people. I'd like to thank the wonderful state representative joining us today, Representative John Bryant and his staff who helped put this hearing together, Representative Bowers for joining us and fighting for the legislature, and Representative Vince Perez coming all the way from El Paso to join us. Thank you so much. Representative Perez held a hearing similar to this in El Paso last month, and it was a huge success. Thank you also to the expert panelists we will hear from today, and to everyone in the audience who are taking the time out of their weekend to join us. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly explain today's format. This evening, we will hear from 3 invited panels: education, affordability, labor, and working Texans. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes for testimony. Following each panel, members will have an opportunity to ask questions before we move to the next discussion. Following all our invited panels, we'll hear public testimony. If you haven't already signed up to testify, please visit the registration table at the front of the room. For your awareness, today's People's hearing is being live streamed and recorded by the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus. Testimony submitted as part of this hearing will inform the caucus's 2027 platform and potential legislation for the upcoming legislative session. Your voice matters, and we appreciate your participation. To learn more about the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus, please visit texaslpc.org, spelling out Texas, or follow the caucus on social media for updates on the hearing and future events. Again, thank you all for being here. Now, I'd like to recognize Representative John Bryant for introductions.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos, and thanks to everybody who came out this morning. We're trying to highlight the true plight of average Texans today in trying to simply get by, get their children educated, and make sure that they have health care. We are in a situation, as Representative Ramos alluded to a moment ago, in which 67 Texas billionaires own 70% of the wealth in a state of 31 million people. It's a shocking circumstance when at the same time we know that our neighbors are having a hard time even buying groceries. My wife came home yesterday with a red onion from Kroger's that cost $2.25, one vegetable. Just to give you an immediately recent example of the situation everybody's facing. It's very difficult to encourage people to eat healthy when you can't afford to eat healthy, and all you can afford to eat is fast food and highly processed food. It's difficult to urge people to get an education when our state government is 47th in the nation in the effort made at the state level to support public education. And half of our school districts, almost half of our school districts, in spite of a huge surplus, in spite of money sitting on the table left over from the last session, are operating in the red. And it's difficult for people today who are willing to work hard, want a job, to be able to pay for what they need in a low wage economy in which we haven't had an increase in the minimum wage in memory. We have a situation in which effectively we're subsidizing some of the biggest companies in the country by paying for the health care and paying for the food through the SNAP program that their employees need because they're not paying them. I hope that our series of hearings will begin to highlight this. It's a humanitarian crisis for a big part of our population. It's a futuristic crisis for us as a state when we're not making the maximum effort with regard to public education. So I'm grateful to all of you for being here and helping us do this.
Thank you so much, Representative Bryant. I now recognize Representative Bowers.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all so much for being here today. I want to first say thank you to our chair. Thank you, Representative Ramos, and to my colleagues again, as she said, Representative Bryant and Representative Perez for being here. The people of Dallas, which you represent, and the communities across Texas deserve a government that listens throughout the year and not only during election season. Today's People's Hearing is about bringing the voices of Texans directly into the legislative process. We will hear, as Representative Ramos said today, from educators, housing advocates, labor leaders, and retirees and community organizations and residents about the challenges that we all face every day. Representative Bryan alluded to that and shared more about it. These challenges are deeply connected to us thriving as a people. When families cannot afford their rent, teachers cannot afford to remain in the profession, seniors are stretched by rising costs, and full-time workers still cannot make ends meet, we are seeing the consequences of policy choices, not to mention all the recalls and the high gas prices that we are faced with. Our responsibility as legislators is to listen carefully, to ask tough questions, and carry what we hear today from you all back to Austin. For me, this means continuing the fight for strong public schools, affordable communities, fair wages, safe workplaces, an economy that works for working people. And I know that is a collective fight here and in the Progressive Caucus. That's why I was glad to proudly join this last session. Thank you to everyone who is willing to share your experience with us, and your testimony really does matter. Your voices belong in the legislative process. So just know we are here to listen, we're here to learn, and ultimately to turn your testimony into action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I now finally recognize Representative Perez. And once again, thank you for joining us from El Paso.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman. Well, it's a pleasure to be here in Dallas. These hearings were the results of the Progressive Caucus coming together to really talk about how we can elevate the voices of ordinary Texans, of everybody who's working really hard and struggling to make ends meet. The problem with the current structure is that right now Republicans set the agenda. That they're in charge, they have the majority, but there's really no mechanism for us to set the agenda and to talk about the issues that are important to Texans. Right now, under the committee structure, most of the majority of witnesses that come before committee hearings are lobbyists who are paid to be in Austin, lobbyists that are paid to have an opinion, and they're usually there front row, first people on the microphone. Austin is far removed from most Texans. Me, it's about a 9-hour drive from my hometown. I'm in a mountain time zone in El Paso. It's very difficult for people from my community and from many communities in Texas to travel to Austin to contribute to the state's agenda. And that's what these hearings are designed to do. There's some very serious issues that, I'm very much looking forward to hearing the testimony from everyone. But when we talk about, I sit on Ways and Means, and the number one issue that's going to be discussed next session is going to be property taxes. You've heard the governor talk about that, we need to continue to reduce school district taxes, but you see what's happening to schools across the state where many schools in my community have already closed and hundreds across the state have also closed. Another issue is that every time that Texas grants, property tax relief to businesses, one of the big tax bills that passed last time was giving a $125,000 homestead exemption to businesses for the first time. That had an impact of $14 million on the city of El Paso, $7 million on the county of El Paso that they're just required to absorb. And every time the state of Texas passes these tax cuts for businesses, it is automatically put on the backs of renters because there is no mechanism to provide tax relief for renters. And so, when a landlord, saves a couple $100 or a couple $1,000 on his tax bill, do you think he passes that down to the renter? No. That's what we have, those are the types of issues that we have to discuss if we're really going to create the agenda. So I just want to thank the chairwoman and my colleagues. You all have such a phenomenal delegation at the Capitol. You can always count on them to be on the right side of the issue. But thank you for participating. Thank you for helping us to develop this agenda. I really look forward to everybody's testimony.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I should say the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus was founded by two of our colleagues, or one is a former colleague, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and Representative Ron Reynolds, and it was back in 2021. So this is our first time moving forward with Progressive Caucus People's Hearing. We look forward to doing it again, and I want to thank all the staff that put this together, Cody, Max, Oscar, and everybody else who helped put this together. So let's begin our first panel on education. As I always say, education was the backbone of the social safety net that helped me in my youth, and it also helped propel my career in the life I have today. Each witness on this panel will have up to 3 minutes for testimony, followed by questions from the committee. I invite our first panel, Dan Michike, Cynthia Boland, and Rena Honey. Max, the microphone. And we'll begin with Dan Michike, who is a member of the Dallas ISD School Board District 3. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, and I really appreciate the invitation to be here. I also want to express my gratitude for the work you have done at the legislature in fighting for public schools. Our public schools are underfunded. I think everybody here knows that we are 47th in the nation in funding for public schools, that inflation has had a real impact on our ability to be able to fund our programs. In 2019, the legislature passed additional funding in HB 3 for public education. There were no inflation adjustments. And then in 2025, at a time when we needed $20 billion just to catch up with inflation, the state passed a $10 billion relief, $10 billion inflation adjustment, all included. And that left us $10 billion behind, effectively a cut in public education funding. So in Dallas ISD, where we have a lot of great things going on, and I would be remiss not to talk about the fact that the voters in Dallas ISD approved a $6.2 billion bond program, the largest in the history of the state, by over a 70% margin. Our citizens in Dallas are supporting public education. And I would also be remiss to not point out that in the recent state accountability ratings that were released, Dallas ISD did extremely well, scoring an 85, which is a B on the state accountability tests. But beyond all that, we are in a situation where we've had to adopt deficit budgets for the last several years. And we are also in a situation where funding that was expected based on state calculations did not materialize. Representative Bryant did an outstanding job outlining this case at the legislature recently. But about $70 million of funding that we were supposed to get, we did not get. So we are in a situation where we are continuing to run a deficit budget. We're able to do that because we've been fiscally responsible in building up our reserves. We can't do that forever. We can do that maybe one more year. We were able to provide teacher raises of 5% generally across, it's not across the board, but on average of 5% for returning teachers. We have a starting salary of $68,000 for new teachers. That's up $3,000. And we are committed to making sure that all of our employees are paid a living wage. So we pay a living wage of $17.50 an hour. So we are doing everything we can, but we do need additional support from the state in the next legislature. So with that, I'll stop. I actually thought this was going to be 2 hours on education. So I brought a lot of stuff. So thank you very much for
Thank
this
you so much.
opportunity.
And even then, 2 hours wouldn't be enough to cover the education issues. Thank you so much, Dan. Now I turn to our next witness, Cynthia Boland of the Dallas Retired Teachers Association.
Good morning. When I first started working for DISD, I brought home $412 a month, and I thought I was rich. But I am co-president of Dallas Retired Teachers Association, and I'm also legislative chair, which I dearly love. When I first met Mr. Bryant and Norma Menace, I had them over to the house because we had not, retirees had not gotten a raise in 20 years. During that 20 years, I personally contracted for 10 so I could pay into Social Security and have some more money, knowing that I was only going to get a third of that Social Security because of the windfall elimination provision, but we got that done away with too. So now I get all my big $900 a month, which does help. But our priority with Texas Retired Teachers Association and Dallas Retired Teachers Association is, of course, to oppose any efforts to close, convert, or weaken the TRS defined benefit plan. It will remain a priority regardless of this report that I understand is coming out September 1st. Have any of y'all seen this report to know what the outcome was? They were to compare the defined benefit plan to a defined contribution, which they do every year. Well, not every year, but anyway, they bring it up a lot. Our first priority, of course, is to restore TRS to actuarial soundness. House Bill 2, which raised the teachers' salaries, which we were all for, and gave more money to the schools, again, which we were all for, created $5 billion in unfunded liability to TRS overnight. TRS is managed well, but when things like that happen, it's just boom. We would like to work to restore actuarial soundness that is affected by that. But what we'd also like to see is that the higher education people pay the same into TRS as public schools do. Currently, they pay less, so they're getting the same retirement benefit, but they're not putting in what a public school has to put in. We also would like, during this legislative session, for a meaningful benefit enhancement to come our way. Prop 9 proved again that Texans do stand for for public education retirees, as it passed with 84% of the vote, even more than the property tax relief. We ask that you work with us to pass a state-funded stipend, COLA, or a 13th check. The surplus is there. We know this. We know we can't get a cost of living adjustment because TRS is not actuarially sound. And until it is, we're not going to be able to get that. What we really would like is a permanent cost of living adjustment that would give us the boost when inflation goes up. And to fund TRS Care. TRS Care, personally, I dropped out of it when they turned it into a Medicare Advantage plan because none of my doctors took it. And if you had an oncologist, if you had a specialist, oh Lord, they weren't going to touch it. But it needs to be funded. The average pension is $2,317 a month. When health insurance goes up, it's just a non-negotiable. You've got to have it. There's more, but I do have a handout for you all from TRTA with all of the further information that it's got much more detail than what I just said. But that is our basic goal, our 3 priorities this year. And we're really needing a push for some sort of help getting TRS actuarially sound. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And our final witness for this panel is Rena Honey, president of the Dallas Alliance AFT.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I appreciate the opportunity to share. There are 3 main things that educators in Dallas and in Texas are asking for: schools that are fully funded, employee and students who are protected, and return the education profession to one that is respected. Each year, educators spend collectively approximately $286,400,000 out of their own pockets for school supplies, and they're making less. When adjusted for inflation, wages are down, and hourly employees like our teacher assistants, bus drivers, food service workers, they make below poverty wages. Our public schools need to be funded based on student enrollment rather than average daily attendance. And we struggle with unfunded mandates like security requirements, reading academies, and the implementation of the cell phone ban. The Texas Constitution prioritized our public schools. Too many laws and policies undermine that priority, sending public dollars to private and out-of-state interests instead of investing in our classrooms and our campuses. The decision to underfund our public schools carries real safety consequences. In 2023 and 2024, there were 11 school shootings in the state of Texas with injuries and lives lost. And in that following legislative session, there were hardly any effective measures taken to prevent future people dying. At least 17 students were hit by cars in the Cy-Fair ISD after bus routes were cut to balance the budget. A special education teacher in Dallas ISD lost her life after she was assaulted by one of her special ed students a few years ago. Facts like these bring pause to educators when going to work has the possibility that they may not return home at the end of the day. Being an educator in our schools and college campuses today doesn't hold the same respect and meaning that it held years ago. Educators are expected to do more with less resources and unfair pay. Every year we hear about accountability in our schools, and they're not afraid of accountability. But we're held accountable for the work of officials who decide curriculum, testing, and funding. And many of them are not educators. It's time that those responsible for making these decisions listen to the employees, the students, and families that show up at various meetings and to the legislative hearings with real solutions. Listen to those that have a true vested interest in the public schools in our neighborhoods, not charter and private schools. When we work together, we can fix what's broken. Our kids deserve that from all of us, and they are definitely worth it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your testimony. Now we'll move to questions from committee members. The chair will recognize members for questions. I'll start. You mentioned the charter schools. The charter school, my daughter used to be a charter school teacher, and now she transitioned to a public school teacher. And I know charter schools say we are public schools, but they are publicly funded, privately operated, which is something that I constantly have to tell people in the community. So she says, Mom, there's a total difference in like what I have to do to what I did over there at the charter school in terms of tracking special needs services or things that I was doing versus at public school. There's a lot of like tracking and ensuring that we do all of these things. She said, that was never an issue over here. We just, with the special needs kiddos. So we also talked about joining the union. Now, how do the public school teachers, the charter school teachers, are they able to join AFT?
Nationally, I believe that they can. In Dallas ISD, they cannot at this point because we don't have the resources nor the staff to keep up with all the different policies and procedures and things that would benefit them. So in Dallas ISD with AFT, they are not able to at this point.
So there's not any legislation preventing them from joining if they wanted to from the charter
Correct.
schools.
Texas is a right to work state. They could join or they don't have to.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Vince.
I had a question about the demographic makeup, and I always talk about this as much as I can. I think a lot of people don't realize that Texas public school population, about it's like 60 to 65% are students of color, and in El Paso, I think when you look at the pre-kinder level, numbers like 70%. I think this is partly the reason why Republicans, I think, are pursuing options that defund public schools, but I just was curious about the demographic makeup. Here in Dallas County, just for my review, so that I can.
Well, thank you for the question. The demographics in Dallas ISD are basically this. We have about 132,000 students. 90% of them, I think it's a little bit lower right now, but almost 90% of them are economically disadvantaged. About 51% of them are English language learners. We are about 72% Hispanic, about 22% African American, and then the remaining 5, 6, or 7% would be white and Asian.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, while you have them, may I be recognized?
Yes, I recognize Representative Bryant.
Good. Mr. Mikishay, first, thanks for your service on the school board. How long can DISD keep operating in the red?
I think we have one more year, possibly two, where we can continue to run a deficit of about 90 million before we reach the floor of what our board policy is for the amount of reserves that we need to keep, which is
Now,
3 months.
I said in my opening remarks, pointed out that it looks like, and these numbers are being compiled right now, that almost half of all the school districts in Texas, the 1,200, are operating in the red at the present time. The point that you made with regard to what we expected to receive and what we received needs to be highlighted. This is a rhetorical question to which I already know the answer, but I want to emphasize it. I was communicating with you during the legislative session and with Dr. Elizalde, our superintendent, and reported to you, as I recall, that we were going to, based on the Legislative Budget Board runs on the, I think it was HB2, the public education bill, DISD was going to receive an extra nearly $100 million. And after the session was over, the Texas Education Agency recalculated all that. And after we'd already voted on the basis of the LBB runs, and it's not just me, all these members looked at those before they voted on the education bill. Afterwards, they recalculated everything. And that's the point you were making earlier, I believe. I'm asking for your confirmation of it, that Dallas ended up with $70 million less than it planned on having. Is that correct?
That's right. I believe the amount that was reported to us as what we would receive in terms of the hold harmless protection was something in the nature of $75 million. And what we wound up with was $4 million.
Now, I'd point out that at the end of the legislative session this last time, we have an expert who's going to be testifying on this later and can correct me or give us better figures, that we left $4 billion on the table that was unspent. And we have a rainy day fund of almost $28 billion sitting there, while half of our school districts are operating in the red, not because they aren't making an enormous effort to raise funding in the local community with property taxes, but because of this underfunding that's coming from the state. If I might ask Ms. Boland a question with regard to retired teachers, you mentioned a cost of living adjustment. The only other state that does not have a cost of living adjustment for retired teachers is Louisiana. So we are competing with Louisiana for the basement when it comes to recruiting teachers, because teachers are as smart as everybody else. If you're deciding what profession to go into or where to go and do that profession, you're going to look at what's going to happen to me 20, 30 years down the road.
Mhm.
And yet,
That defined benefit it's not only a draw, it's a way to keep people. If you know that you know exactly how much money you're going to, and you know you're going to get it, it keeps the teachers in the district and they don't leave and go work for Southwestern Bell. Oh, wait, that ages me, doesn't it? AT&T, excuse me.
yeah. But you made the point earlier that we have teachers out there who retired teachers who went for 20 years with no
20
increase in
years.
their retirement.
No.
20 years.
And you know what? At the time, because I was contracting and making probably as much money doing that as I would have made teaching or as an educational diagnostician in Dallas.
So, would you clarify contracting, what that means?
I contract as an independent contractor. I contracted with an agency that paid into Social Security so I could get my Social Security.
I see.
I could get some modicum of Social Security.
Uh-huh.
And this lady in turn contracted with charter schools. And so I went to charter schools, which again was a kind of a shock, but as a special educational diagnostician. And I was paid good money for doing that. So I did that 10 years. And then the next 10 years, I got nothing, you know. But
So you did that for 10 years so that you could collect Social Security.
collect social
So in other words,
Social
you moved
Security
out of the non-Social Security
Mhm.
environment of
Into-
public school
yes,
teachers into the
into
private industry.
private industry.
Yeah.
She was private, where I could get that Social Security,
Okay.
knowing I would only get a third of it, but I had to have it for the
Yeah.
Medicare because I wanted the Medicare paid for. So I got enough to pay for Medicare. Otherwise, I would have had to pay for the Medicare out of my. Now, I know the TRS Care is a Medicare Advantage plan, but you're still having to pay for Medicare. It's not like you're not paying that portion as well.
Okay.
So
I have more questions, but I don't want to hog the forum here.
The chair recognizes Representative Bowers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And no, you're not hogging the whole hearing. My questions are pretty general and just wanting you all to make it plain so that we, for the record, get that in there, just simply what we can do. The first question is, what state policies would make the biggest immediate difference in helping Dallas ISD recruit and retain high quality educators? That's the first question. Go ahead.
Adequate and equitable funding.
And I think we all know that that is what we fight for. And so expound upon that. What do you mean by adequate in funding?
Well, ideally, what I would like to see is a inflation adjustment attached to all of the funding provisions. Because what we really had was an increase in nominal dollars with HB2 in the 2025 legislation, right? There was the claim that this was the biggest increase in the history of public education in the state of Texas. Well, all it was a partial inflation adjustment. When you need 20 billion and you get 8, 9, or 10 billion, you're still short 10 to 12 billion dollars. And so what we needed was something that would build in a cost of living adjustment to account for inflation in the future. If you were making $100,000 in 2019 and inflation was 20%, right? You need 120,000 to be even. Well, and if you get 10,000, you're not even. You're not 10,000 ahead. You're 10,000 behind. So that would be the biggest factor. I would also prefer to see more funding go into the basic allotment, where districts would have control over the spending, as opposed to in terms of all of these incentive, outcome-based and grant funding that the legislature has moved into. And I also think with respect to charter schools and vouchers, don't enlarge the voucher program. It is mostly turned out the way we expected, that the people who are getting money for vouchers are largely people who already have their kids in private school. With charter schools, there's an abysmal record, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, of the charter schools that have been approved by the Board of Education in the last 5 or 10 years have largely been unsuccessful. A majority of the newly granted applications for charter schools have wound up with D and F ratings. So whatever you can do in that regard, I think would be helpful as well.
Yes, if we can, Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I just wanted to add before you start, Rena, to Cynthia, I tried, I guess, in 2021 maybe, to amend the budget for a cost of living adjustment, and the amendment didn't pass. Mm-hmm.
I remember.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, I think there are a couple things that could happen. In the basic allotment, Texas is one of very few states that gets the allotment on average daily attendance. That needs to be enrollment. Because when you take a snapshot one day, if a kid isn't there, it just goes away, and it's certainly unfair. I should have written it down. There was also a way to retain. Let me think there was something else. It was the basic allotment would be a huge plus. That hasn't been adjusted in many, many years. And when Dan was talking about the retention, we have a lot of our teachers that would like to live in the area where they teach, and they just can't afford it.
Yeah.
You know, the tax credits for the businesses and corporations totally ruin that for our public schools. The other thing was the charter schools. They're not held to the same standards that our public schools are. They're not required to have certified teachers. They can work them all day, every day if they wanted to. They're not required to provide special education services. And a lot of the people that took the vouchers, they wound up finding that services were not provided. So they have left those campuses that they went to, but the money stayed at the private schools. There are also things with the charter schools called stranded costs, that when a student leaves the public schools and goes to the charters, there is a reduction in students. So we still have to have bus services. We still have to have teacher pay, the assistants, all of that. And so Dallas has lost like $86 million in the last few years from those kinds of costs. So it's all tied together, but the money, in my opinion, Texas funds 4 different educational systems: our public schools, charter schools, vouchers, and homeschool.
Yeah.
And all of those options, Dallas ISD has choice schools. They don't need all those other talk about. So there are certainly things that we could discuss but those are a few of the ones that could truly be helpful.
May I be recognized?
All right, I recognize Representative Perez had a question.
Well, he's probably continuation.
Okay,
No,
go ahead.
yeah, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to point out that to add to what you're saying and to what Trustee Mikashay said a moment ago, of all the Commissioner of Education has approved 900 charter schools, gotten the board to go along with him on those. 900 statewide. In many cases, they're literally across the street from a public school, competing with it. They're given public money, but it's a business operated by private people. It's a business that has chains. Some of them have multiple schools all over the place. It's a big business. 40% of all the ones he's approved have failed in the last 10 years. That means all that money we put in there went out the window. All those kids came back. And I wanted to ask you what your teacher's experience is when these kids come back from charter schools.
They're behind, and the parents are mortified. They were doing so well, but they're usually behind. It affects their scoring, their evaluations, and in Dallas ISD, it's directly tied to their pay. So we have teachers that have to play catch up with these kids that have come back, because our public schools don't close the doors to anybody. They're open to everyone. And what we find mostly are that the kids coming back into the public schools, they're behind. And the teachers have to really work extra hard to catch them up.
Well, and I'd like to just say a word of congratulations to Trustee Dan Mikashay over here that our district in Dallas received a 85%
Yes.
of what Mr. Morath calls a B rating. I call that an A rating. That's extremely good. With a population, a school population, 90% of whom are economically disadvantaged. And 2/3 of the charter schools out there receive a D or an F rating. These ones that are competing with our public schools. So pardon me for making a speech.
Let me just say also, Dallas ISD has moved up 9 points, I believe, in 4 years to get to that. That is the true work of our educators in the classroom every day, leadership from our trustees, and a phenomenal superintendent.
Thank you. And I, as on a personal, my personal experience has been the same in that my children went to parochial school. And when I transferred them over to public school in high school, they were behind. And I had to pay extra to catch them up just to our regular public school standards. So I think that's very true. And the last question from Representative Perez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trustee, I mean, one of the biggest issues of Texas school finance is that just the way that Texas funds public education through property taxes, which is inherently inequitable. But one of the things I guess that has complicated school district funding is that there's two ways that the state grants property tax relief. One is through homestead exemptions, which in my argument is the most equitable, that delivers relief for the people who need it most. The second is through compression, and that benefits big business. In my in my district, the tax rate used to be like $1.30 per $100 of valuation. Now it's like, I don't know, 95 cents, 97 cents. Eva's actually one of the foremost experts back here, and she's in the audience, and she'll be testifying next. But the thing with compression is that that tax benefit goes to large corporations. Do you have any historical context of what your district maybe used to have its tax rate at to where it is now? Because the state of Texas is on the hook for subsidizing those tax discounts, as I call them, for big business. And as the property rolls grow, the state of Texas has to pay more money, not going to this, the school district, but it's going to this property tax discount. And as a result, the state of Texas now spends $50 billion on this property tax relief. We now spend more on that than higher education, public safety, and child welfare combined. But do you have that historical context of where your district's tax rate was to where it is today?
Yes. Well, there are actually two tax rates that are built into the school district property tax rate. There's the maintenance and operations tax rate, which is, I believe, the one you're referring to. And then there is the INS tax rate, which relates to school bonds. But it is the maintenance and operations tax rate that is the one that is subject to the compression. And I believe about 10 years ago, it was $1.17. And today it is going to be something like 98 cents. And, part of the problem with this is that the districts don't have any control over what the tax rate is anymore.
Right.
I mean, and there is a lawsuit, I think out in Midland, that argues that what we have is a statewide property tax, which is a violation of the Constitution. But when we go to vote on the tax rate for the maintenance and operations tax rate, which is the one subject to compression, we have to vote yes for it, because there is no, we don't have any alternative. We can't lower it and we can't raise it, and we have to open up our schools. So we have to have a tax rate that is passed by the board. So when you can't raise the tax rate and you can't lower the tax rate, it's not really a local property tax.
Right.
It is one that the school district through the county assessor serves as a collector
Right.
of the statewide tax.
Right. It's more of a ministerial duty now because you don't
Right.
have that flexibility. And the state is going after localities just for that, where they're taking away the authorities of cities, counties, and school districts to have that type of authority.
Can I just add an amen to a couple of things that Rena said
Yeah.
about enrollment-based funding? That is a very specific item that I hope all of you can support, and I think you might be able to get bipartisan support for that. And the other thing about charter schools is there is a state law that basically says that once a charter school is approved in any part of the state, that charter school can expand without anybody's permission. So if you open up a charter school in Richardson, you can then open up charter schools in El Paso and anywhere else in the state. And that law should be changed so that the expansion has to go through some kind of approval process. You can imagine a case where you open up a charter school in some tiny town someplace, and then you start entering all the major cities without any kind of approval. But if we could cut that off, that would be great.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our education panel for sharing their time and expertise. Very last comment.
I'd like to invite the panel and Dan. Dallas Retired Teachers Association has the District 10 TRTA Legislative Chair speaking the second Friday in September at the Turney Leonard Building, which is a DISD building. And I'd like to invite you all to come if you'd like to. He does an excellent PowerPoint about all this.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you. Now we'll move on to our second panel on affordability. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes for testimony, followed by the questions from the committee. I'd like to invite to our second panel Fabiana Moreno and Eva de Luna Castro. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We'll begin with Fabiana Moreno, Advocacy Director of Texas Housers. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Chair Rodríguez Ramos and members of the caucus. Thank you so much for inviting me to testify. My name is Fabiana Moreno, and I am the Advocacy Director at Texas Housers. We are a statewide organization that has worked for decades alongside low-income Texans and communities that have historically been left out of our housing market. So today I want to talk to you about two sets of numbers. The first describes the problem and the second describes what Texas is doing about it. So first, the problem. In March, the National Low Income Housing Coalition released its annual gap report. In Texas, there are 26 rental homes that are affordable and available for every 100 extremely low-income renter households. Extremely low-income renter households is defined by households with an income at or below 30% area median income. In absolute terms, Texas is short roughly 700,000 homes for our lowest income renters. That is the second largest shortage of any state in the country behind only California. And 79% of those Texas renters are severely cost burdened, meaning they spend more than half of everything they own on everything they earn on only rent and utilities. It's worse in our metro areas. Houston has 17 affordable and available homes per 100 of these households, and Dallas-Fort Worth has 18. In Houston and Dallas, 85% of extremely low-income renters are severely cost burdened, among the highest rates in the nation. And this is not a coastal problem that Texas has escaped. On this measure, we are one of the worst states in the country. Now on the second set of numbers, what the state is doing about it. TDHCA's own 2026 state low-income housing plan tells you that roughly 600,000 extremely low-income renter households in Texas are cost-burdened, and that only 21.7% of those renters live in a unit actually priced for their income. That same report showed TDHCA administered $1.8 billion in fiscal year 2025. The Texas Housing Trust Fund, our one flexible state-controlled housing resource, accounted for $3.7 million of it, and that is 0.21% of TDHCA's overall money that they administer. For the current biennium, the legislature appropriated roughly $10 million in general revenue to the Housing Trust Fund. Across the 29.6 million Texans, that works out to about 17 cents per Texan per year. Nearly everything else TDHCA administers is federal money passed through Austin on its way out the door. Texas has effectively outsourced its housing policy to Washington. And that was always a risk, but it is now an urgent one. HUD has lost enormous institutional capacity. Fair housing enforcement has been rolled back, and last year's budget request proposed cuts that Congress only narrowly rejected. Texas cannot assume the federal backfill will hold. Instead of funding, Texas has bet on land use deregulation. In recent sessions, the state's primary housing response has been to loosen local land use rules, lot sizes, parking minimums, by right multifamily development. And I want to be clear here that Texas Housers is not opposed to building more housing, but the evidence, including our own research, is that deregulation does not reach the households that I've been describing, the Texans that need it the most. And we have in-state proof of that. So Houston has effectively no zoning. Houston also has the worst deficit of housing affordability to extremely low-income households of any major city in this country, except for Las Vegas. Austin ran the other experiment. Austin has built more multifamily than nearly anywhere in America. 20% of its housing stock went up between 2010 and 2022 against 8.8% nationally. The median asking rents fell roughly $700 from their 2022 peak, and that's a real accomplishment. But Austin still, regardless, has only 46 available and affordable units per 100 households at or below 50% AMI. So deregulation moved the median, but it did not reach the bottom. Even the strongest advocates of these reforms describe the policy as land use reform combined with increased public funding. Texas has pursued the first half of that and left the other half alone, and the funding gap is measurable. Texas has the 8th largest economy in the world. Deregulation cost the state absolutely nothing, which is in large part a part of its appeal. But the gap it leaves behind is the part that requires action. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Next, I'd like to recognize Eva de Luna Castro.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us here to talk about affordability. Previous to my current job as a state legislative staffer for Representative Donna Howard, I worked for a group called Every Texan, which used to be called the Center for Public Policy Priority, and also for the Controller of Public Accounts. So that's where my experience comes from. And I do have a handout that I hope everybody in the audience got. If you didn't, there's extras. But I just kind of, in my 3 minutes, want to touch very briefly on what the legislature could do, should do, is doing to kind of make up for what the average Texas household needs to cover and what they can't cover at their current employment and income level. So the kind of the high level takeaway is 3 things. The first is that if we have better regulation of auto, home, life insurance, all the different insurance policies that in Texas are way more unaffordable than other states. Like our auto insurance rates, I think the last time I checked were 40, the first, like the most expensive. And home insurance, I think, is stabilized, but still the thing with doing something about insurance is it's a regulatory thing. It doesn't cost the budget as much as some of the other things I'll be talking about. But making insurance more affordable. Almost everybody in Texas has to drive to get to work. So we worry about gasoline, but insurance is another big thing that could be done. Another area for any family that has children that need childcare. That's not most families in Texas, but a lot of families do go through a phase where they need to be able to leave their child somewhere safely. Texas, as we heard about housing, doesn't do much more than what we get with federal money. So if I'll start by talking about the handout here. There's one that has like little symbols for housing, transportation, food, healthcare. I won't read all of that to you, but basically your average Texas household that's in the middle, by the time they've covered those basics, there's only 14% left for everything else they have to cover. And the problem is that childcare, the cheapest childcare you can find for a toddler, is 16% of what they might have available to spend. So you see how that doesn't work. They're gonna try and cover childcare. If they have 2 children, that's 32%, and that means they have to cut somewhere else. They're gonna decide not to have health insurance for themselves or not to have any savings. So that trade-off is how families have to live day to day. If you look at what the state does over on the left, only 1% of our $338 billion budget is going to childcare, and 92% is federally funded. For housing, $1 billion is what you can find in the entire state budget, and that's including like after a natural disaster. 96% of that is federally funded. We just heard how like we really need to put our own state resources into these if we want to make childcare and housing more affordable for families. So where does our money go? You see on the state budget side, when we look at the main things that it costs a family to live in Texas, on the state side, we've only spent 52%. We still have about half of the budget. So the other side is where we explain a little more, where is it that we are spending our dollars? We heard from the first panel about public education. That is the single largest thing in the budget. It makes some people think, well, isn't that enough? But no, we've heard we rank 47th. We're trying to educate 5.5 million students, and that money just does not go very far. The difference between that's enrollment, attendance is 5.1 million. So we're basically making schools deal with 9% less funding when we fund on average daily attendance instead of enrollment. Higher education, I do want to mention there, Texas has a long history of having very low tuition and making our community colleges and higher ed institutions 4 years very affordable. We do need to do more for financial aid though. And we also need to make sure that we keep our promise to community colleges. We just reformed how community colleges get funded. And if we don't keep the promise, they're gonna have to resort to property taxes and tuition increases. I think I'll stop there and leave time for plenty of questions. But the main thing is if we really want to help families, we need to fund the things that they cannot afford on their own. We need to make sure we have public quality schools available, quality childcare available. We also need to make sure that when the state benefits from the tremendous inflation that we had during the pandemic, that we just don't sit on that and keep it and hoard it for things like property tax cuts that are permanent. We need to make sure that the people suffering from inflation, families, school districts, community colleges, everybody else gets some of the revenue that they need just to not fall further behind. So I'll stop there. And again, any questions y'all have, thank you for having us here.
Thank you so much. I'll start with the question regarding the child care expenses. And I think for many parents, the summer experience with your children at home, one of our team members said, oh my gosh, I forgot. School is like childcare. Like now you can actually do stuff and, getting back to your regular schedule. So, and I recall when my kids were little, childcare was really, really expensive. But New Mexico recently started providing childcare subsidies for families to pay for those childcare expenses. Could you speak to the impact of if we were in Texas, instead of giving $1 billion to people to send to wealthy people to continue to send their kids to private school, if we in Texas would dream big and maybe use some funding to have a child care subsidy, what would that mean in terms of affordability, workforce? What generally would be the impact in our economy for a family to have child care subsidized?
Oh, I mean, like I said, if almost 20% of a family is what they're trying to make from this family that I gave the example of is making about $60,000 for about 3 people. So they will only have 1 child. But if this family is struggling, if we basically let them have 20% more of their money to spend on other necessities, they could have a bigger emergency fund. I mean, that's a lot to have 20% of your money now is going to something that you can not have to worry about or not be on a waiting list. That for a lot of families right now, they are on a waiting list for childcare that can be 2 to 3 years long. So if we wanted to serve 10 times the number of kids that we currently, that's how many are currently eligible but not getting served. And that would cost $10 billion of our own state money. Because right now, local boards, everybody's already donating all the money needed for match. But we could do a lot more. And it doesn't have to be just in a childcare setting. Some of this would help school districts that offer pre-kindergarten. Some of it would help other existing childcare centers. There's like these partnerships that are being set up, school districts, childcare centers, workforce boards. Like we know how to do it, but we do need for the state to make a commitment and not just have the federal funds that are there be it. Like we need to do more. And that's what New Mexico's doing. They're not just going with the federal funds, they're going beyond that.
Yes. And then I imagine a lot of families would be able to go to work,
Yes.
Have both parents go to work if the child care was subsidized. And then you have the consumers paying more taxes, and then you have more of a robust economy. I recognize Representative Bowers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's sort of where my concerns are too with childcare. That's literally what got me here, by way of being on one income. My family was on one income because of the childcare situation. Our family was growing, and what salary I could get on a job, my husband was just like, well, with the cleaning bill and gas and wear and tear on the car, all of that's going to add up. And so one of us just needs to stay home. So I ended up staying home. I spent a little time in the classroom, just as a sub to make extra money, which was not my profession of choice. However, it called me there to the classroom. My kids were in school. And so I guess I want to take us to the other things that are on your list, whether that's housing or healthcare with prescription drugs, that people shouldn't have to choose between. I think about now, since being in the legislature with these lovely people, with health concerns of my own, now diabetic on a GLP-1, how am I going to pay for all of that? And should I get the full prescription? Should I just get the 1 week dose, or should I get the 3 months dose? How are we able to afford these things? And I just want to say thank you, because I feel like I've been in class with you, Eva, for the whole time I've been in the legislature. So thank you for the information you always provide.
Yeah, one thing I'll add to your comment, because what you said is important. When families can't cover everything, they have to make choices. So like somebody who's renting an apartment and it's more than they can afford, they're gonna try not to have as much spending on utilities. So they'll try and not, and like it'll be so hot there that, and this really happens in Texas every summer when we have these terrible heat spells. If they're on medication, a lot of times medication doesn't work if you're in a room that's just too hot. So so like utility assistance programs is another thing that we every now and then we try and provide. But yeah, having things that are safe. It's like people are forced to make tough choices, and then they end up getting reported to CPS or APS. It's like, so everything like a daily struggle and a trade-off. We should focus on things that make it easier for people, obviously, not something that ends up landing them in the criminal justice or public safety system. And then the other thing I think is like we do see the legislature making better choices. Like last time we had now I think a lot of teachers now, they are eligible for free pre-kindergarten at their school district. And I think other school staff can also enroll if there's room. But sometimes a school district can't afford to have that program. So if it exists, I think teachers can now get that, but it's not always the case. But then we're also on the flip side, making it harder for local governments to figure out a way to help. So if we could encourage local governments to work together, instead of telling them, no, you have to lower your property taxes and you have to fund public safety. So they really have to like get rid of things that they used to do.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
could I ask a question of Fabiana? I love saying your name. That's beautiful,
Thank you.
Fabiana. So then I think you could answer something with the housing part of it. So we get a lot of questions in our office from people calling to and constituents wanting help with their utilities. So, and then also, with rent assistance. So how do we help with that? Because the eviction courts are really saying that this is causing an issue, and they're coming to our office. We're sending them to agencies, and it's just becoming a cycle. So how do we stop the cycle?
So a lot of the available rental assistance is not through the state, but actually locally. And that is a place where I believe that the state should step in and provide through the Housing Trust Fund or just a dedicated source for rental assistance, emergency rental assistance. Most of the funding right now at TDHCA that is in the Housing Trust Fund or that is for housing is mostly for home ownership programs. And I believe renters are largely left out of any sort of state assistance, whether that is through utility assistance or rental assistance. So that would be something to champion is, asking TDHTA to have a dedicated rental assistance program. So it really would depend on the local government and what they provide.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I know I'd like to recognize that Representative Bryant filed some legislation to give some property tax relief to renters. And the idea was that it would also help the young folk, our young adults, or people who are young families who are exempt for any of the property tax relief that we were providing. And so we need to do a better job as a state to really help the renters, because one of the conversations that we've had, and especially with Representative Hinojosa, is the corporations coming in and buying the inventory, which then impacts the higher rents that our people are feeling. And so we appreciate both of your testimony today. Thank you so much. And will everybody give our panel a...
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had one more
If you
question.
have time.
Yes,
Okay.
Representative Bryant.
Good. Ms. Moreno, thank you for your testimony. I just wanted to tease out what you've already said, but correct me if I'm wrong. What you've said is that effectively in Texas, we have no affordable housing program. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
All we do is appropriate enough money to manage federal money.
Yes.
How does
that's
that compare to other large states? What do they do?
So I can say that I know that so I used to be the committee clerk for the Senate Committee on Intergovernmental Relations back when it was, before it was local government. And there was testimony that we heard, I believe back in 2019, that, and I know we don't always like to use California as a comparison, but the city of Los Angeles had a the city of Los Angeles had a housing trust fund that was in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and the state of Texas, I believe at that time, was below $10 million per biennium. So I looked into this, and the housing trust fund currently, or for fiscal year 2025, assisted 126 households in total. And we have how many million Texans living here? So, and that's definitely a problem. So there effectively is no affordable housing program.
Thank you. And Ms. Castro, would you tell us how much money is sitting on the sidelines right now that taxpayers have paid, and could be utilized for the things that the witnesses have talked about?
Sure. The number that you mentioned earlier was just a little below the actual amount. 4.7 billion in general revenue is what was left unappropriated by the last legislature. And then in addition to that, we've now put more money in the rainy day fund. So that's 28.5 billion right now. And then this year, sales taxes are doing better than expected. The controller makes a prediction last fall about how things are doing. The first fiscal year is about to end, and that we'll probably hear in a month or two that there is more money there than what the state thought it was going to collect from the sales tax, which is where 60% of our taxes come from. So we're getting more money than we expected. We have a lot of money sitting there, but then the bad news is for the next 2 years, agencies are being told cut your budgets by 3%. So we're not starting off in the right way, and it's because we're trying to make those tax cuts that Representative Pettis mentioned. $50 billion in existing property tax swaps needs to be continued and maybe added to, but we don't have new state taxes to pay for that. So they're trying to make it work with whatever is already there left unused. So,
And in your pie graph, you have a slice of pie at the bottom, business and economic development. If I'm reading that right,
Yes.
it's $48 billion.
yes.
Is that correct?
Yes,
Could you
and
tell
that's-
us what that is?
Yes, that's primarily, if you look at the previous page, the transportation and the childcare, that is part of business and economic development. A lot of people think childcare is health and human services, but we do childcare through the Workforce Commission. TxDOT is also considered business and economic development, and both of those agencies get a lot of federal money. So there's not a whole lot of our own state dollars in there.
That's federal money.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the every time you buy a gallon of gasoline, you pay federal and state gasoline taxes. A lot of that money has to go to highways because of the Constitution. So in addition to some of the recommendations that have been made, we could also fund schools that way. We could say like, we could dedicate money to it the way we've dedicated to the water fund. But right now, highways are the only thing in our budget that get a dedicated source of revenue like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question.
Okay, go ahead.
It's simple.
Yes, Representative Bowers.
It's just quick. I mean, I just want to know if either of you believe we've had enough rainy days to dip into the rainy day fund. That's all I want.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our affordability panel. Everybody, give them another round of applause, please. And finally, we'll move on to our third and final invited panel, Labor and Working Texans. Each witness will have up to 3 minutes for testimony, followed by questions. I'd like to invite our final panel, Diana Ramirez, Renee Martinez, and Danita Jones. Thank you. Welcome and thank you for being here. We'll begin today with Diana Ramirez, Executive Director of the North Texas Area Labor Federation. And as they pass the mic to her, thank you so much, Ms. Ramirez. You may begin.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Ramirez. I am the Executive Director for the North Texas Area Labor Federation. We have several people here from the ALF. The North Texas Area Labor Federation covers about 9 counties across North Texas. We are a newly formed ALF, and so I just want to mention that before I begin. We also have about 40,000 unionized workers across those counties. That they all work in different industries. You heard from Brina. And so we have from plumbers to musicians that are part of the ALF. And I'm here today to speak to you about working Texans, people that look like you, like me, like our neighbors. I also used to work for Workers Offense, where I gained also a lot of knowledge around workers, and where I learned that Texas is the only state that does not require workers' comp. My husband is a construction worker, has gone through several injuries himself, and I also learned it the hard way. Where also wage theft is very rampant. I specifically remember whenever we had our oldest, who was about a year, I was staying home because childcare is so expensive. He was the only income that we had. And then 1 week, his employer was like, oh, sorry, we don't have any money left for you, basically. Where we had to then go to my parents and be like, hey, we need some money. Because as I think Eva was mentioning, you have to make sacrifices on a lot of things whenever things like that happen. And so, and Workers Offense works a lot with the immigrant community. And so I bring knowledge both from both of those groups. And so one of the things that I found that we all have in common is wanting a good, safe, and dignified paying job. I think that everyone here in the room that is really sort of like we see it as a basic, should be a basic. And to be able to retire and enjoy our retirement and not have to worry about paying the light bill, about how am I going to feed myself whenever hopefully I get 70, 80 years old. And for schools and teachers to be supported. So with that, I just want to thank you for your time. I do have a list of policies that, and I think that most of you already have heard them, but increase wages and expand workplace benefits, protect workers on the job, expand paid leave for Texas families, protect all workers no matter their status, support our schools and teachers, reduce state employee turnover, support public sector retirees, fix the unemployment system, create jobs in clean energy, and invest in the Department of Labor apprenticeship programs. So yeah, with that, I just want to thank you for your time. And I really look forward to working with you, whether it's me, whether it's my partners at the state Fed, or any of the presidents from their local unions, to find solutions for working Texans.
Thank you so much. Next, I recognize Ms. Danita Jones. And Ms. Danita Jones, you are with what entity?
I'm the founder of Citizens Lab.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Danita Jones. I'm founder of Citizens Lab, an organization committed to making sure everyday people have the information and tools to power and advocate for themselves and their community. I'm here today because when we talk about the future of Texas, we cannot have that conversation without talking about the people whose labor keeps Texas running. We hear constantly that Texas is good for business. But my question to you is Texas good for workers? Texas workers are building our roads, teaching our children, caring for our families, driving our trucks, stocking our stores, delivering our packages, and keeping our communities function. Yet our minimum wage is $7.25 an hour. At 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, that's only about $15,000 a year before taxes. And here's what that actually looks like in the lives of a working Texan. To afford an average one-bedroom apartment in Texas while earning $7.25 an hour, a worker will have to work approximately 132 hours a week. And I want you to think about that. 132 hours a work week to afford a one-bedroom apartment. And there are only 168 hours in an actual week. That means that after working the hours necessary just to afford housing, a person will have only 36 hours remaining for everything else. Sleeping, eating, commuting, caring for their children, and just simply living. So I have to ask, who can live like that? And can we really call that an affordable economy? A person working a standard 40-hour week at minimum wage simply cannot afford a typical market rate apartment alone. Yet everything else has continued to go up. Our rent, our groceries, our transportations, healthcare, childcare, utilities, while the value we have placed on people's labor has remained stagnant. And we need to challenge the idea that simply having a job means someone is economically secure. What does it say about our economy when someone can work 40 hours a week and still need assistance to feed their family? What does it say when a parent has to choose between paying the electric bill and buying groceries? And what does it say when people are doing exactly what we told them to do? Work hard, show up, and be responsible, and they still cannot afford to live. Our job market is also changing. We have automation, artificial intelligence are transforming industries. Workers are being told to get more education, earn another certification, learn another skill. But we need to ask ourselves, what are we training them for? Because training people for jobs that still not provide economic security is not enough. Workforce development must lead to good jobs, jobs with living wages, affordable health care, and child care. We also have to talk about priorities. Texas has demonstrated that it is willing to use public policy and tax incentives to attract corporations and major investments. So if we can develop policies to make Texas attractive to corporations, why can't we be equally intentional about making Texas livable for workers? When public dollars support economic development, working Texas, our elected officials should be asking how many good jobs did it create? What did those jobs pay? Do they provide benefits? Are local workers even being hired? And then this investment equally improve the lives of our constituents. Because no job is automatically a good job simply because it exists. Working Texans don't need to be told to work harder. They are already working. The question is whether our policies are working just as hard for them. So I'll leave this panel with one final question. What would Texas look like if we measured economic success not by how many corporations we attract, but by how many working families can actually afford to thrive here? Texas cannot be an economic powerhouse without the workers who power its economy. There is no Texas economy without Texas workers. And working Texans deserve wages, dignity, security, and a real voice in the decisions that shape their lives. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to recognize Mr. Rene Martinez with the LULAC Council 100.
Good morning. Thank you, Representatives Bowers, Bryant, Ramos, and Perez. I just want to say that Representative Bryant and I attended college together and graduated together. I won't say when, John, but many years ago at SMU. So it's really a welcoming eye to see all of you here today. I'm representing LULAC. I'm the president of local LULAC Council in Dallas, Council 100. LULAC, as most of you know, has been in existence for over 97 years, the largest and most active Latino civil rights organization in the nation, all over the country. Here in Dallas, we have probably over 30 councils, adult, collegiate, and in high schools, high school councils. So we are very active in the community. And for whatever reason, my name and my council have been put on the website, LULAC website, to deal with a lot of the immigrants that have been coming into our area for the past 2 years. So I can give you some anecdotal examples later in terms of what those experiences have been. But I wanted to cite the 3 major priorities that LULAC has identified and wanted me to identify to you today. First, civil and human rights as our priorities. Secondly, voter participation. And thirdly, comprehensive immigration reform. The first one, I don't think I have to tell any of you all what's going on in our streets in terms of our neighborhoods, racial profiling, people being stopped, arrested, and deported. And as most of you know, and you've heard this before, approximately 80% of those that are being detained and deported have no criminal records whatsoever. And I have been very involved with local police officers and the police chief here in Dallas. And we've been supported in terms of by the police department to not get involved in those ICE raids or ICE detention. Took a lot of strength on the part of our chief, our city manager, and the council, but we haven't seen that in Dallas. So we have joined other organizations throughout the nation in terms of supporting folks that have been stopped, have been detained. And we have many people, especially children, that are in detention centers that are going without legal representation. Our LULAC leaders have visited Dilley, the Dilley Detention Center, and we're very concerned, not just concerned, we're very active in terms of making sure that those detention centers are looked at, and various congressional delegations have joined us in terms of seeing the conditions and the way those detention centers are run. We are very concerned also, number 2, in terms of voter participation. We're facing intimidation and suppression throughout the nation in terms of potential voter participation coming up in the midterms, and we have to be ready for that in terms of mail-in ballots, more IDs to be presented at polling places, and then, of course, the possibility of ICE and other federal agents being at the polls and having their presence. So we're very vigilant in terms of those things that are happening and that could be happening. And we joined other organizations and groups to counter not only those in the courts, but also to become proactive. LULAC has taken the lead in voter registration throughout the state. Here in Dallas, we started about 12 years ago voter registration efforts in the high schools. And that's become very, very important and very significant thanks to the Superintendent Hinojosa and Superintendent Elizalde. We average about 1,200 to 2,000 high school seniors that are registered in the high schools. State law says that principals can be given that right to be voter registrars in their particular schools, but that hasn't been utilized statewide. So we've taken the lead in a program called Marching to the Polls in registering those kids that are about to become 18 and those kids that are 18, registering in the schools, not necessarily in the auditoriums or the gyms, but going into the classrooms and registering kids. And finally, comprehensive immigration reform. Having spent the past 2 years working with TPS recipients, asylum seekers here in Dallas, folks from Venezuela, folks from Cuba, folks from Mexico, helping them find housing, food, while their legal proceedings are going through. I think we really, and I know that there's expertise not only at the legislature, but in Congress, people that may already be there or will be elected to start really defining what comprehensive immigration reform is, beginning with DACA, and looking at all those tenets that define comprehensive immigration reform. Not rhetoric, but specific points that we can come together and have legislation in Washington that addresses that addresses guest workers, that addresses workplace and employment sites that can not fear those rates. To address ICE, everything from eliminating ICE to starting all over from scratch in terms of an agency that truly reflects a federal agency that is here to serve the people and not scare people and not intimidate people.
Amen.
So I urge you all to begin developing some study groups to really help our Congress people to really define what is comprehensive immigration reform. It's not rocket science. I think we have the expertise. We have some in LULAC, a national office. When President Trump came into office, we got together a group of interns in Washington, Latino kids, that put together a handbook to help families in terms of knowing their rights. And it was done within a matter of 30 days. We brought together those young people, and it became a kind of a manual that we used for the communities, for the schools, for the churches, produced by young people that are in college. So we have that expertise, and I urge you to look at that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony, and I'd like to
I think Yvonne Davis is here. Did she? You want to invite her?
I'd like to recognize Representative Yvonne Davis.
Where is she?
Would you please join us, Representative? Okay, she's listening.
All right.
Representative, thank you so much, Representative, for joining us. Next, I'd like to recognize Gene Lance, and he is with the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans. Gene, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm the vice president of Deanna's group for another month and a half. And I'm also president of the Texas Alliance for Retired Americans. And it is the only retiree organization, the only seniors organization in Texas that endorses and supports candidates. And we're proud to have supported these. If we are the only ones doing it, then I say that I'm the president of all 4 million of all 4 million seniors in Texas. And I think because nobody else represents them, just us. When I was asked to do this, Ana Pomar called, and said, we're going to do this, and it's going to be this long. You're going to have 3 minutes. And, like that. And I said, you don't have to sell me. You had me at Ana-María Ramos. Because you cannot win in this fall without the Democrats. I don't want to hear anybody say, skip the election or this election doesn't matter or this election is irrelevant. You cannot win. You cannot beat fascism in 2026 when you have to beat it without the Democrats.
Amen.
So bring them on, and especially the Progressive Caucus, Ana-María Ramos. I was delighted anyway to get to talk to a bunch of people who have recently been found to be commies and terrorists.
Yes.
And I wanted to try this. I just want to see if I'll get arrested because Lon Burnham did, and everybody knows what a terrorist that state representative is. He got arrested for lifting the microphone. And so I just wanted to see. Don't see them yet.
We'll hold them back.
Yeah, we'll hold them back.
People think that what's going on today is ordinary. People think it's usual because we're just going by our common sense. Our common sense is based on what we have seen and maybe what our mothers told us, what they saw. There is no precedent in America for what Trump and the Trumpsters are doing today.
Yeah.
If you want to try to understand what Trump and the Trumpsters are doing, you will not find it in American history. You have to go to German history.
Yeah.
I told my executive board on Wednesday at my local, I'm on that too. I told them, you are not going to have unions in America within 2 years if Trump wins this election. Because unions, by their very nature, are opposed to fascism and dictatorship. Because unions are painfully democratic, as Rena will tell you, and as Deanna will tell you. The fact that unions are democratic is enough to mean that they are on the enemy's list for the dictatorship. So look out. It's coming. We have to win. We have a great opportunity to build our coalition on September the 9th. Cardall Coleman, the chairman of the Dallas Democrats, started this. I don't see him here, but I see some really good Democrats here that are active precinct chairs like I'm about to be in another week. And I see that people are gearing up and getting ready. Well, September the 9th and 10th, the Trumpsters are going to put on what they started off calling it a convention. Now they're calling it a Trumpapalooza. And I think they should just skip those 2 syllables and just call it Trumpsalooza. But anyway, they're going to have that big extravaganza here in Dallas, Texas. Dallas, Texas is a very historic place. It was my understanding that LULAC started here on 12th Street. So this is a very historic place. A lot of things have happened here that have affected the whole world. And one of them is September the 9th and 10th that's coming up. So get with Cardall Coleman, get with that coalition, get with the protest movement, get with the streaming service that we're going to do. We're calling it People's Convention. We don't know how to do it, so we're just finding our way. We have to ask Rose's husband for help all the time. And hopefully we'll be streaming under the name People's Convention. So if you see anything that says People's Convention, please share it, because otherwise we won't be able to get the word out. But September the 9th and 10th is your next opportunity to defeat fascism, to defeat the dictatorship in America. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you so much, Gene. Amen to everything that you said. Thank you so much. Now I'd like to invite members of the panel. If you have any questions, committee members, I'll start with the first one, and this is for Renee.
Yeah.
We're talking about, you referenced the families that have been, and a lot of us have no members in our community or what have you that are scared to even come out of their houses, their apartments, or scared to go to work. What are some of the experiences that you're hearing from families in the community? Many times, I know we have people who help in our community and different laborers who come and help, and they're scared. They just go straight to home from work, but there's a lot of people who don't even leave their homes. What are some of the things that you're hearing in terms of how they're addressing that and how community members can help with these families? Because they're losing income, they're losing while prices are going high or, are rising. What are some of the things that we can do as family members and as community members, and what are they doing to help fill in those gaps?
I've helped maybe 3 or 4 dozen families prior to the Trump administration and then going into the Trump administration. Prior to the Trump administration, those families, TPS, asylum seekers from Venezuela, Cuba, some from Mexico. First thing that I was able, once they contacted me, was housing. And it was not difficult obtaining housing. Going to the city of Dallas, an office that Liz Seville runs, connected me with Catholic Charities and other church-affiliated programs, Oakland Methodist, to obtain housing vouchers, free housing for at least 1 to 2 to 3 months before these families could get their feet on the ground and get their kids in public schools, which Dallas did very easily in terms of intake centers and processing the kids. Food, a lot of food centers that we could, again, identify through the churches, through interfaith and others, and provide them food. So housing, food, and schools were the three things that were just needed as they arrived. And of course, they were progressing through their legal process. They had, some of them could work, found that some had work permits. Okay, fast forward into the administration of Trump. The housing went away. So those folks that got here or had been here, some have gotten jobs legally, some illegally. These folks are resilient in terms of obtaining employment. They want to work, and they will work wherever they can. I didn't help them get jobs. They have a network that fulano de tal, compadre acá, they connect, there's a job opening, and they go to those locations and get jobs. Kids are in schools. Kids here in Dallas, yeah, there's a lot of fear, but the kids are safe in the schools. Food continues, minimally. So those things have just, the housing is totally eliminated. A lot of these individuals also move from apartment to apartment. I'm not a lawyer, I'm an educator, and I tell folks that still call me and say, what do I do, Mr. Martinez, now that I have a hearing? And I think most of you have heard that the hearings are entrapments. Basically entrapments. Te van a atrapar. You go to a hearing, and these folks are going to abide by those dates that they're supposed to report to the Capitol building. Well, I've got to go there. And I'll say, talk to an attorney before you go, because the cases are coming back. They're going in. Immigration judges, John, you know this as a lawyer. They'll hear the case, they'll dismiss it, they walk out in the lobby, and they get arrested. Okay, so a lot of these folks have figured that out because they have dates of reporting, and some of these dates are a year away, and some of them are just going to ride it out. They're continuing to work, continuing to find apartments. If they're working, they're feeding their families, they're providing some housing, they're looking for very inexpensive housing. So there's congregations in Victory Meadow, the Victory area, where the vast majority of immigrants are housed in the Dallas area. So again, thank God the Dallas police are not out there using 287G and any of that legislation to partner with ICE. So the suburbs are different. The suburbs are different here in Dallas. Irving, Grand Prairie, others. But in Dallas, I can say that they don't have to have that here in terms of having a DPD partnering with ICE.
Thank you so much for that testimony. We were in Houston at a people's hearing there, and it was right when they found out that the Houston police was working with ICE, and a lot of people felt that was directly connected to the murder of Lorenzo Araujo. So I expressed to some of you people, some people in the community regarding a situation, a personal situation where in care of two young children whose mother went to an immigrant who was then detained, and children were released from school and have not seen their mother again. And that was since April. They have not seen their mother again. So we know that as educators, as people in the community, there are many, probably there's going to be tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of children all over the country who are going through these, who are American-born citizen children that we are now traumatizing as a country. Not to mention the fact that if they don't have parents or they're with another caretaker, those individuals who are able to get jobs, who are without status, I imagine the wage theft is then now going to be even more aggressive in what is happening in those communities. Could you speak to a little bit about that, or anybody could testify of more experiences that you're hearing now with wage theft, because this community is now even more vulnerable than it was before?
I don't know if you can hear me. Yes.
No, thank you.
So wage theft has been going on since, I mean, my oldest is now 16, right? And although we are seeing a lot more raids, a lot of more detentions, employers have used this fear tactic for ages. Workers Offense had a member electrician, her and her husband did the electrical work for an Aldi. They were contracted by a contractor. And it was Christmas time. This was maybe 10 years. Imagine Christmas time having two young children, and both of them worked at the Aldi. And the employer was like, I'll pay you next week. I'll pay you next week. Eventually was like, okay, come to the job site and I have your check. Well, he didn't have the check. He had to call the cops on them and had constructed a whole different story. And so I've seen or heard how that has already happened. And this is 10 years ago. And so I can only imagine how worse it is. And what that creates in people and workers is like, you know what, I'd rather lose on this money and find somewhere else to work than risk being detained and things like that. And so I don't think there's anybody else here from Workers Offense that can speak more as to like what it is like now. But if it was like that 10 years ago, I can only imagine that it's much, much worse. And I think we've all seen also videos of workers being detained at gas stations, right? I think that a lot of, and when Rene mentioned that there are networks, there are people are very resilient and very tight knit. And so if construction workers will be stopping at in the morning to get coffee, to get something, that has decreased a lot. Why? Because why am I going to stop and put myself at risk? And so, yeah, I just, you asked about wage theft, and that was 10 years ago.
Thank you.
Can I have one
Yes.
I'm still working with a family from Mexico that's been here 2 years. And when I met him, they introduced their daughters, one was 16, the other was 19. They were both U.S. citizens. They'd come from Mexico, but had been born in Pennsylvania and went back to Mexico as 2-year-olds. So these two young ladies were U.S. citizens coming from Mexico with the asylum-seeking parents and have been here for 2 years. So the young ladies have passports, are citizens. Both of them are working legally and going to school. One already graduated, going to college, but the parents are not. So again, the fear is on the parents. What's going to happen when you drive, driving without a license? They're not drinkers, so they're not going to be stopped for DWIs, but driving to their jobs. What's going to happen to the children? And we talk about that. What's going to happen if you get stopped? Thank God the young ladies are older now, but that could happen. Very similar to the family that you're here.
Yes. And before I recognize you, Jean, you mentioned, and these stories I think are so important, and it's part of what we learned. You referenced Germany. You read so much about many of the experiences that those individuals had during the Holocaust, and this is not dissimilar in the fact that we need to keep those stories and we need to continue to document and have as we're having these experiences, because this is something we never want to repeat in this country again. And then, like Jean mentioned, we don't have really a history of what's been going on now. And so this is something that we really all, I think the responsibility is on everybody to collect these stories. And at some point, there'll be an opportunity where we can continue to share these. Jean, you had a comment?
I just wanted to add that the unions are very, very good on immigration. Now, some of us are older and we remember when they weren't. Up till 1999, their position on immigration was that they should all be deported. But in 1999, they made a change. We had a march of 2,000 down the street here. A year or two later, we had a march of 500,000. And labor was right there. Labor is stood up for their immigrants, not only their members, but for the whole idea of decent treatment for our guests in America. So the unions are on our side on this, thank goodness.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank all of our invited witnesses for sharing your time. Please join me in thanking our Labor and Working Texas panel for joining us today. Now we'll open the hearing for public testimony. If you've signed up to speak, I'll call speakers in groups of 3 in order in which they have registered. When your name is called, please come to the front and be prepared to testify. I'd like to call Rosie Kurtz, Kim Bachelor, and Arash Farsad. Sorry. Yes. Yes, awesome. Thank you so much. And we'll begin with you, Rosie.
I thought by sitting in the middle, I wouldn't have to go.
Well, you sat first.
Good morning. My name is Rosie Kurtz. I am a rank and file member of Alliance AFT Local 2260. I'm a high school math teacher in Dallas ISD. I'm also the co-chair of the Committee on Political Education for the North Texas ALF, and I represent Texas AFT in the AFL-CIO Executive Board and Texas AFL-CIO. So I had a lot of thoughts during stuff, both about labor and about education, both those panels. I think that it's very important that we talk aspirational because we want to make sure that long-term goals aren't forgotten by the time Democrats do seize control of Texas. Because I think that nationally, Democrats have a problem with taking control and then being like, oh, we're in control, everything's fine now, and not doing the systemic change needed. One example would be when Obama had control of both houses and people said, you should codify Roe v. Wade. And everyone said, nah, we're good. And then this happened. And when you make systemic changes, even if we eventually lose power again, they're a lot harder to undo. You can look at how they couldn't get the votes to repeal Obamacare because once people had benefits like covering pre-existing conditions, it was too unpopular to give it up. So this leads me to the biggest thing for me as a teacher is collective bargaining rights for public sector workers. I know that wouldn't get passed in the legislature as we have it now, but I think it needs to be remembered and talked about and brought up every legislative session. I know that Representative Lauren Ashley Simmons from Houston filed that bill last session. It's not a coincidence that the first rep who was elected out of labor was the one that filed that. And I think that it needs to be talked about so that when we do have that power, we can pass it. Yes. In Utah recently, which is another red state, they already had collective bargaining rights. The legislature tried to repeal them, and the unions got together and raised so many signatures against it that the legislature itself just backed down and repealed their own repeal because it was so unpopular, even in the red state, because they already had it, and so they didn't want to get rid of it. I also think that labor is a really, really, really important thing for people to pay attention to because it's a place where union meetings are a place where you can go and talk and you're not just preaching to the choir. People join unions for all kinds of reasons. There are unions that have more conservative members and they join because it's a good, it's a good job. They have good rights and they support workers' rights, even if they're conservative on other issues. Or they might be completely apolitical, but they come to their union meetings. And if we came to union meetings, we being Democrats, elected officials, and listened to them, then and made sure that they knew that they felt heard and responded with legislation directly to it, that's where you actually get converts, right? Instead of just preaching to the choir and encouraging people that already vote to vote. And then in terms of education, what I thought during the education panel is there's a lot of problems. And obviously, I don't want to sound dismissive of the fact that we need fully funded public education. That's incredibly important. But again, something like collective bargaining, we wouldn't have to go fight the legislature every 2 years to struggle for any kind of pay raises or any kind of working condition improvements if we had the power to negotiate those and take charge of that ourselves, and had the leverage to strike if we weren't getting what we wanted. So we could free the reps from having to spend so much effort on this if we empowered teachers to do this ourselves. The other things that I've narrowed down to be like core root of the problem things with education is we have to get rid of the state's ability to take over school districts willy-nilly, not just because of not wanting them to subject to the really disastrous reforms of Mike Miles, who already, his impact on DISD is still being felt with the really terrible pay for performance system we have, but also because of the threat of takeover. I think that school boards a lot of them don't have the political courage to do different things, to try new things. I think my school board doesn't really want to overturn our pay for test score system because it would leave them, Marath would be mad at them and look for an excuse to take them over, right? So if we took away that ability, they could actually act, with what they know is right. I also think that the Texas Education Code needs to have a part of it repealed that says that school board members can't be paid. School members not being able to be paid, it's a completely volunteer job, and that restricts the people that can serve on a school board to people who are independently wealthy or have cushy jobs that allow them flexible hours, instead of having people like teachers or regular people serve on them.
Thank you so much,
okay.
and your time is up. Thank you so much, Rosie. We appreciate it. Next, I'd like to recognize, Kim, Kim Batchelor.
I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak today, and for the extra minute I don't get down at the State House. I am coordinator of Project Matthew 2820, and one of our major initiatives is Texas Christians for Reproductive Justice. I spent a lot of time, I almost lived at the Capitol last year, and I just spent about 9 hours with the Senate State Affairs Committee, and that was a lot of fun. So I wanted to talk about two things, though. One is, I believe opposition to abortion and also immigration, hostility toward immigrants, is correlated about 80%. If you are anti-abortion, you are often equally hostile. That's not everyone. I want to respect everyone's beliefs on that issue. But at the same time, these are so important, and they're both very much connected to affordability. So to the Christians, I always say Leviticus 19:34, you are to treat the immigrant as a native born. We got a lot of Christians down in Austin who are not following that. And then, of course, in Matthew 25:31-46, Jesus said, if you oppress immigrants, you end up in eternal damnation. And I always like to share that a little bit with our Christian brethren. So in the last year, one of the things, I live in Oak Cliff, and I was talking to, when we first started getting signs that there were ICE activity in my area, went up to talk to some business people, and one of them told me, and this is just in 2025, probably right about the time things were starting to happen, and he said, they treat us like dogs, they treat us like animals. And then now I have been canvassing over the last month, and I'm hearing equally people who are saying this is one of their major issues. Affordability, obviously, but at the same time, a young man saying they profile us, a woman saying these are just people who are working hard, and she's so emotional when I talk to her at her door. So I think that's really important. I also sat for many, many hours at Austin for the redistricting, hearing over and over again, Hispanics all vote Republican over and over again. And I just wanted to say, I don't think you're hearing what people are saying now. So just quickly, I'll try to go into the reproductive rights, because there's a lot of stuff going on there, and it is affecting very much people's, people who are pregnant, have unplanned pregnancies, or having to leave the state of Texas. Just really quickly, a month ago, a friend of mine's daughter, and miscarriage is so common, but her daughter, who had miscarried a very wanted pregnancy, was very well treated at the hospital. They put miscarriage when she went to, on the prescription for the medication, and she was treated so badly by the pharmacist and is allowed to get away with. She was sent home. And she was in pain, emotional, both emotional and physical. The other thing is that I think it's really important. I have asked every anti-abortion legislator about why they believe in first trimester personhood. I've got not a single answer, including from John Sago and also from other anti-abortion organizations. Please help us also protect contraception. We think they're coming after that next.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. And finally, Arash Farasat. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Arash Farasat. I'm a union member of the United Professional Organizers. I'm an officer, one of their Secretariat Committee, and also a member of Workers' Defense Project, Deanna's former group that she worked at. I was there for that case that she spoke about. You'll have to forgive me, I don't have a speech prepared or a topic because I was originally called upon to be Labor's photographer today, but I got gang pressed at the door to speak. But I did have a conversation this week that I do want to share with you. Is with a friend of mine. He works in service where I also happen to work between elections. He works over on the McKinney Strip where all those restaurants are. He works five lunches a week, 5 shifts, and he gets about $100 a day from those shifts, which is pretty typical for a lunch shift. And so that comes out to like $2,000 a month. Working 5 days before taxes. His rent is $1,800 a month. How is a person supposed to, be independent? He's a young man, start their life. You're talking about people entering the workforce, how they're supposed to start their life, start their families, live their lives. When we have this system that squeezes people and just juices them, not even like fruit, like turnips that don't even have a lot of juice. They're just squeezing them. And I hear politicians talk about, well, we got to subsidize the developers so they'll build more of these. What? So they'll charge $1,800 a month? Y'all need a more robust strategy. I say y'all, the present company excluded, but I mean the political class. And over the years, tying it back to my electoral work, I actually worked in 3 of the 4 of your districts canvassing. I see that conversation too. It's not just my friends and the people around me. It's also on the doors that I knock. And I started in the Obama years. We're now in the Trump era. I've seen those neighborhoods drift to the right over that 10, 12-year period. And that is something that the party needs to have messaging to reach those people, because as Gene said, there's a threat of fascism. And if you look and see what happened in Germany, why did that happen? Because of what happened after the war, the economy was down and people were looking for someone to blame. And that's what pernicious actors seized upon. So we need to have a counter message for those same people who are suffering.
Thank you so much. That is so on point. Thank you for your testimony. Everybody, if you give our panel a round of applause. And our last panel would be Julio Acosta, Angie Caraway, and Amanda McLaughlin. And I want to thank you as our new panel is joining us. One thing that we don't really talk much about is when we talk about our renters or our housing and the schools closing, a lot of us here and my community specifically is the majority renters. But we know when schools close, property values go down, and a lot of people don't really think about that, as that's many people's largest investment is their home. So thank you. Julio, we'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julio Acosta. I use pronouns he, él. I just want, first and foremost, thank you all so much for having this and for going all around Texas, listening to Texans about issues that matter to us. I love everything everybody has said about public education, about housing, about abortion. I also think, I may have missed the beginning, but definitely voting rights coming up in November is going to be huge. And if y'all with the Texas Progressive Caucus and Progress Texas and other organizations that are trying to educate and inform population can just do what we can to educate people to make sure that they register to vote as soon as possible, make sure they have their voter registrations up to date, make sure that anything is suspended or anything that they know who to contact, whether it be the Texas Civil Rights Project or any other organization, ACLU, etc. I do also want to mention, I'm pretty sure that y'all are all the right side of history on data centers. I hear that that is a very, very big issue across Texas. And then I do also want to mention, I don't know if people know, but there's this thing called flock cameras. And generally the law enforcement cycle begins with the person breaking the law and then having an investigation. with flawed cameras and all these other AI data processing things, we are all suspects, and all of our data is being tracked. Our vehicles, the color, the bumper stickers, decals, any other identifying features. And I just really think we all need to be against that. One, because it goes against the Fourth Amendment, and two, because it's being used against all of us. And the last thing I want to mention for the last like 30 seconds or so is that according to a Texas Tribune article that came out in April 22 of 2024, up until that time, Texas has this thing called Operation Lone Star. And up until 2024, we had already spent $11 billion with a B, criminalizing immigration here in Texas specifically. And that's $11 billion. That's probably much, much higher now in 2026, but that could have been used for any of the other things that we know that are important. Yes. So again, thank you all so much for your time. And thank you to everyone that's fighting so much for justice and for what is good.
Thank you so much, Julio. We appreciate you. Thank you. Next, Angie Caraway, and thank you so much for what you're doing as well, Ms. Caraway, running at what district?
HD 89.
HD 89.
We are your Collin County neighbors that are going to turn blue.
Thank you so much for running in Collin County.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is what representation looks like. This is how it should be all across the state. So I really appreciate you guys getting this together. I just have a few things I wanted to say. I am a 15-year public educator and a union member. So
wonderful.
Thank you. First thing I wanted to mention is I would like for you to think about the State Board of Education. Currently, there is no specificity that they have to have time in a classroom. I would like to see that to be on the State Board of Education, it's a requirement that you have classroom experience for at least 10 years. I'll settle for 5.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
One of the things I'm concerned about is all of these takeovers that are happening across our state. And being that the charter schools are rated so terribly, are they in danger of being taken over by the state?
Probably not.
Probably not. Several months ago, Representative Mihaela Plisa asked me, what is one thing I would do to go against my party? Recapture. If you're not familiar with what recapture is, it is also known as Robin Hood, and it is not serving the poor as it should. I think that needs to be looked at again. I firmly believe that there should be no state mandates for schools that are not funded, i.e. our school resource officers. As a teacher, I do want to be protected. We know that we lose our lives as teachers being in the classroom, unfortunately, from gun violence. So if it's going to be mandated as a state mandate, it should be funded as well. That's a lot of this in the red, like the state school board member from Dallas said, where they're falling short. That is because of that, or a reason of that. And then one of the things it was mentioned during the education is that almost 60% is the percentage of schools that were approved to accept the vouchers were pre-K programs. So like you mentioned, Representative Ramos, that like New Mexico has decided we need pre-K programs to be covered within our public schools to help alleviate some of that squeezing of the turnip, as the one guy said, for affordability. So that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Caraway. Thank you, and look forward to working with you. And finally, Amanda McLaughlin, thank you so much. And Amanda is also part of our additional committee that we have in House District 102. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just want to thank all the legislators here for your efforts on affordability, education, and labor. I mean, this is constructive work that's important to people, and this is what we need to be focusing on, okay? Unfortunately, we often experience destructive politics where fear is used to divide and control people. We also experience where it's about unity, about uniformity, not unity. And if we really want to be strong, we need to emphasize diversity. Diversity is a strength and should be sought after. With so many communities being attacked, we need to show support for all people. There's strength in uniting. As a trans woman, it's easy to attack me. But when we unite and show the beauty and diversity, we have strength. We should focus on including people, not excluding people.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who came forward to testify today. Your testimony, your stories, and your lived experiences are exactly why we're here. Listening to the people that we serve is the most important responsibilities we have as elected officials. And everything we've heard today will help inform our work as we prepare for the next legislative session. I want to thank my colleagues and our panelists and the staff of the Texas Legislative Progressive Caucus, our volunteers, and every member of the public who joined us this evening, today. Before we adjourn, I want to say thank you to our community. Thank you. Have a safe day. Have a safe weekend. And may God bless you all. And there being no further business from the committee, this hearing stands adjourned. Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Yes, Human Rights Fair downstairs. We have a comment from Representative.
I just wanted the crowd to meet another candidate. Angie Caraway courageously is running for the legislature up in Collin County. A candidate also courageously running for the legislature in Denton County is Dietrich DeBuer, right over here. And shake his hand before you leave.
Can I say one?
Yes, Representative Bowers.
I just wanted to say as well, thank you, Representative Ramos, for the very diverse panel that you've pulled together in all of us, as well as the diversity that is seen in this room. When I kept looking out at you as the panels came forward, I just saw real faces on the issues we're discussing. So thank you.
Thank you. And once again, this is not the last time. There's so much more that we need to talk about. Education, 2 hours a minimum. But yes, there's so much more as community members that we really want to address. And we're going to continue to have these hearings throughout the session as we convene back in January. In January, did you want to wrap up?
I just want to say thank you very much. I mean, I learned so much with each one of these hearings. So just, your testimonies was just incredibly valuable. Everything's going to be transcribed and reported to the entire caucus at the end. So everybody who has signed up, please sign in at the outside so that we can have all this information for the record.
Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Good job. Good job.